Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, Mexico. She was the second of three children to parents Maria del Sacramento Saganon and Manuel Perez. Raised alongside her older brother Javier and younger sister Ana, the family lived modestly, but provided their children with a good education and motivated them to aspire to a better life. Abril excelled in school, showed a talent for mathematics and entrepreneurial skills, and dreamed of obtaining a high-quality higher education to secure a well-paying job with career advancement opportunities. After finishing high school, Abril was admitted to the most prestigious university in Nuevo León, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Upon graduating, she was hired in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. A few years later, she ventured into digital sales and quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and steadily advancing towards the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, supported her family, and was full of plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unsettled, which disappointed her loved ones. Nevertheless, she was confident she would find true love and live a long, happy life. Little did Abril know how her marriage to the perfect man would turn out. Abril met Juan Carlos in the mid-1990s, when her career was taking off. They were both ambitious, which created a strong connection between them. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, kindness, and intelligence, while she was drawn to his sharp intellect and determination. As their companies collaborated on projects, they crossed paths several times, eventually leading Juan Carlos to realize he was in love with Abril. Through mutual acquaintances, he obtained her phone number and asked her out on a date. The feelings were mutual, and their relationship developed quickly. By 1998, they decided to formalize their relationship with a wedding. By then, they had both achieved considerable career success and were involved in developing online stores, which showed great promise. Their life resembled a true fairy tale, evoking envy and admiration among their peers. After 3 years of marriage, Abril gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they had a son named Juan Carlos Jr., and another 2 years after that, they welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Despite having 3 young children, Abril managed to balance her parental responsibilities with her career advancement, barely taking any maternity leave. From the outside, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, and happy. However, appearances were deceiving. Behind closed doors, Juan Carlos showed his true nature, being hot-tempered, aggressive, and harsh. He was intolerant of compromise, insisting that everything had to be exactly as he wanted. Over time, his behavior worsened, and verbal altercations escalated into physical confrontations. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan Carlos briefly softened, trying to control his emotions, but it didn't last long. By the time the third child was born, he no longer even tried to be a good father or husband. He would vent his anger on Abril, insulting and belittling her, and her tears seemed to lift his spirits. He regularly physically harmed her, often in ways that left no visible marks on her body, so she could hide the bruises under clothing or mask them with makeup. All this was done to protect his flawless reputation and pride himself on being a model family man, loving husband and father. Abril kept silent for years, trying not to tell even her sister and mother about the ongoing nightmare. She earned well and could have raised the children on her own. But her husband was a wealthy and influential man who could easily take the children away from her through the courts. By 2010, the ideal family facade had begun to crumble, and those who once admired them started to suspect that something was terribly wrong behind closed doors. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed, visibly thin, sleeping poorly, and frequently sporting bruises on her face and body that became increasingly difficult to conceal. In public, Juan Carlos maintained a calm and confident demeanor, pretending that nothing was amiss, playing the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with his wife politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a monster, making it increasingly dangerous for Abril to be near him. Despite pleas from loved ones to divorce him, Abril stubbornly insisted that everything was fine and that she would handle the problems with her husband herself. In 2014, Juan Carlos's career reached its peak when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in the field. After this promotion, the family moved to Mexico City, settling in a large house in one of the capital's best neighborhoods. Their children attended an elite private school, and Abril sincerely hoped that the move would positively affect their relationship. Contrary to expectations, the change only made Juan Carlos continue to physically harm and insult his wife, even doing so in front of their children. He began to groundlessly accuse her of infidelity, and whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to using his fists. He monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and later even hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, despite her husband's behavior becoming utterly unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare that outwardly seemed like a happy and successful union, with many even envying her for having a prominent, influential, wealthy, and seemingly caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family traveled to Monterrey to celebrate Catholic Christmas with the Perez family. However, Juan Carlos behaved towards his wife as he was accustomed, not shying away from her parents, who were horrified by what they witnessed. At that moment, Abril realized things could not continue this way and informed her husband that she would file for divorce once they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos flew into a rage, grabbing her throat and squeezing so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Only her mother, Maria del Soro, entering the room and raising the alarm prevented a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce, moving from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not save her from her tyrannical husband. On the morning of January 4th, while she was still asleep, Juan Carlos entered the bedroom holding a baseball bat, striking her hard on the head and attempting to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but managed to slip off the bed just in time, literally saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body while the eldest son took the bat from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed Abril with a serious concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow, requiring stitches. As soon as his wife and sons left the home, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to explain the situation and asked for help in resolving it. He also posted on his social media page, claiming that his wife had betrayed him, was unfaithful, and intended to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to take all their jointly acquired assets. Moreover, he claimed that his wife had stolen all the money from their home safe, and that when he tried to stop her, she injured him with a knife in the shoulder. As proof of his innocence, Sanchez shared photos of a bloody knife and stains on the floor, but these were later revealed to be fake. The blood was from Abril's own room, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite this, his friends believed him and shared his story on social media, sparking widespread outrage. Meanwhile, Abril had filed a police report against Sanchez, accusing him of attempting to kill her. After being released from the hospital, she moved out of their home with their sons and was granted temporary custody. Their adult daughter, who was in college, also sided with her mother and condemned her father's behavior. Sanchez was ordered to pay a small amount of alimony to Abril and their sons, but he disagreed with the amount. He faced a potential prison sentence, but as an influential businessman, he was confident he would avoid punishment. Abril returned to her parents' home in Monterrey, where she filed for divorce and began offering online consultations to women in similar situations. She planned to open a center for psychological and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence. 8.5 months after the incident, Sanchez was finally arrested and charged with femicide, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was jailed for over a month, but managed to appeal the pretrial detention decision and was released. During the trial, crucial evidence, including hospital photographs and medical records, was not presented. The judge deemed the testimonies of Abril and her sons insufficient and released Sanchez, stating that his actions did not pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and frightened by the verdict, realizing that her ex-husband had used his connections to secure his release. She sent an official letter to the judge expressing fear for her life, but it had no impact. Immediately after being released, Sanchez began legal proceedings against Abril for custody of their sons, forcing her to return to Mexico City for court sessions. Abril arrived in Mexico City with her children on November 25th, fearing for their safety after a court session. As they drove to the airport, a motorcyclist stopped at a traffic light, pulled out a handgun, and fired twice at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. One bullet grazed their younger son, but none of the children were seriously hurt. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life for over 6 hours, but unfortunately, she died that evening due to severe injuries and significant blood loss. Abril's family, convinced that her ex-husband Juan Carlos was behind the brutal act, urged authorities to arrest him. However, law enforcement stated that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to discuss motives and couldn't claim that it was a hitman sent by Sanchez. The case was not classified as femicide until further investigation, and Juan Carlos remained free. After Abril's death, her children were placed in the care of their maternal relatives, while their father, Juan Carlos Sanchez, prepared to fight for custody in court. Sanchez's soon-to-be ex-wife's sister wrote an angry social media post blaming him for the incident, but her page was quickly blocked and later deleted. Despite this, the family decided to draw public attention to the case. The attack on Abril, which occurred on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence, sparked widespread outrage. People began sharing numerous cases where men had attempted to kill women but were not punished. As a result, the General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into Sanchez and instructed investigators to review the judge's decisions to release him. The judges involved in Sanchez's case were temporarily suspended and later removed from their positions. Mexican politician and women's rights defender Claudia Sheinbaum Parro confirmed that Abril's case had been reclassified as femicide and would be reinvestigated. The judges who had released Sanchez could face consequences for Abril's death if his guilt was proven. Sanchez posted on social media, calling for the perpetrator of his ex-wife's death to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. However, his daughter Ana Cecilia left an angry comment, accusing her father of cruelty and sharing photos of her mother taken in the hospital after Sanchez had attacked her with a bat. Despite the media attention, Sanchez was initially left free under a restraining order, required to check in weekly at a police station. However, after he failed to appear, a warrant for his arrest was issued. He used his resources and connections to flee the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Sanchez as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was declared wanted worldwide. An investigation was launched to find the hitman who killed Abril. Street camera footage revealed 2 cars following her vehicle as she left the courthouse with her children and lawyer. The motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone, but received instructions from individuals in the cars. It took investigators several months to identify some of the participants, and 2 suspects were finally arrested on March 5, 2020. Surprisingly, they did not resist arrest and began cooperating with authorities, hoping to reduce their sentences. It was confirmed that Sanchez was the mastermind behind the crime, having paid a substantial sum to 7 individuals involved in the act. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the chase cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. Juan Carlos, while in prison, had hired 2 experienced criminals to be his personal bodyguards. After they were released, he rehired them to find people to kill Abril, promising each a large sum of money if they succeeded. Once he had assembled a team, Juan Carlos paid them the promised money and gave them detailed instructions about Abril's route and vehicle. The toughest part was luring Abril to Mexico City, which he achieved by threatening to take her children if she didn't appear in court. Abril showed up in court as planned, but intended to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan Carlos knew this through his connections, but it wasn't until the end of October 2020 that 3 more people involved in the conspiracy were arrested on suspicion of drug distribution. It was later discovered that they were involved in Abril's murder. All the arrested individuals were part of Juan Maldonado's gang, known as Juan Balto, which had protected Sanchez while he was in prison. Maldonado agreed to help kill Abril in exchange for a large reward. He was arrested in November 2020 and began cooperating, confirming that Juan Carlos had hired people to kill Abril. With this new evidence, it was clear that Sanchez was both the client and organizer of the crime. His previous assault on Abril with a bat was reclassified as an attempted murder, leading the court to issue an arrest warrant for him on charges of femicide. By spring 2021, all the participants in the crime had been caught, except for Sanchez, who remained at large. The weapon used in the murder was also found. In total, 9 people from the same criminal group were detained, 7 of whom were directly involved in chasing and shooting Abril. 5 years after Abril's death, Sanchez, the mastermind of the crime, is still on the run, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The person who pulled the trigger was sentenced to 52 years in prison, while 2 others involved in the crime received 50-year sentences each. The other participants are still under investigation, and their fate has yet to be decided. On March 20, 2020, in the city of Aloha, Portugal, 20-year-old Diogo Gonçalves went to meet a girl he admired greatly. Unfortunately, he had no foresight on how this seemingly romantic evening would culminate. The picturesque resort town of Albufeira, noted as one of the premier destinations in the Algarve region of southern Portugal, was Dee's birthplace in 1999. As an only child in a modest yet industrious family whose livelihood hinged primarily on the fluctuations of tourism, Diogo was regarded by his parents as an exemplary son. Acquaintances described him as decent, responsible, hardworking, and reliable. Additionally, he was an outgoing young man who cherished the company of friends and family. Diogo pursued his high school education in his hometown and subsequently embarked on a computer science degree. To support his academic aspirations and contribute to household expenses, he began working at McDonald's at the age of 16 in 2015. By the time he was 17 and still employed with the renowned company, Diogo's life took an unforeseen and tragic turn. One day, his father suffered a stroke, which led to him being in a vegetative state. The media reported extensively on this event, compounding their troubles that same year, as Diogo and his mother were grappling with this new challenge. Another misfortune struck him hard. His mother, his unwavering supporter, was struck by a vehicle on her way to work at the mall where she was employed as a cleaner. She was dragged several meters by the car and fell into a ditch. Sadly, she succumbed to her severe injuries. Even though the driver fled the scene initially, law enforcement officials were able to identify and bring him to justice. While awaiting legal proceedings against those responsible for both his parents' dire situations, it became necessary for Diogo's father to be placed in a specialized medical facility for appropriate care. His maternal aunt, concerned about his precarious circumstances, invited him to stay with her. However, due to irreconcilable differences that emerged after weeks together, cohabitation proved unfeasible. Subsequently, confiding in a friend about these challenges led to an offer from his friend's parents. They provided him accommodation within their residence, located in Alouez, Algarve neighborhood. This proximity alleviated some distress for Diogo, as living amongst familiar faces brought some semblance of comfort during such trying times. Despite being quite young, Diogo showcased remarkable skill in handling challenging situations through patience and optimism. At 18, he completed his degree in computer technology in 2017 and secured a 6-month internship at Vila Vita Park, a renowned 5-star tourist hotel. His performance there was noteworthy, leading the executives to offer him a technician role. In 2018, Diogo decided to accept this position, resigning from his job at a fast food restaurant chain where he had worked for nearly a year and attained the role of duty manager. He embarked on a new chapter of his life, anticipating numerous opportunities that would aid his progress after the difficulties he had faced. As Diogo began to settle into his new job and look towards a brighter future, he decided to purchase a car. He formed good relationships with colleagues, including Maria Malva, a 19-year-old security guard at the hotel, who particularly caught his attention. Like Diogo, Maria also came from humble beginnings and had encountered significant challenges. Her mother struggled with mental health issues. While her father abandoned the family early on, she never reconnected with him. Maria was passionate about martial arts and practiced karate. While she aspired to become a police officer, her application was rejected due to her tattoo. This setback led her to enroll in training at a security company specializing in various private security sectors. Diogo openly expressed his admiration for Maria from the start, but she did not reciprocate his feelings and was rather aloof towards him. Fabio Acosta, a close friend of Diogo's, mentioned that Diogo was infatuated with Maria. According to Fabio, Diogo's dedication to her was intense enough that he declined an attractive job offer from the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon because he did not wish to be separated from her. Additionally, when Maria was working her shift, Diogo often brought meals for her. As time went on, they became almost inseparable observers, frequently assumed they were a couple despite there being no romantic relationship between them. Maria confided in Diogo that she wanted no romantic involvement, as she had recently ended a toxic relationship with a naval officer, but simultaneously gave him mixed signals. Despite this ambiguity, Diogo never abandoned hope for a future with her, and continuously sought ways to be near her and show his affection through various gestures aimed at pleasing her. One day, Diogo was deeply disappointed when he stumbled upon a video on social media showing Maria kissing another girl on the lips. He felt upset because he believed she should have informed him that she did not like men and that this was why they would never be together. Fabio, Diogo's best friend, attempted to calm him by explaining that girls sometimes do this, but Diogo remained unconvinced. He insisted that she had misled him and that this was why she had rejected his romantic advances. Despite this disappointment, Diogo and Maria stayed friends. She continued to accept his gifts and invitations for dates. Many times, Diogo offered to walk her home, but she always mentioned that her roommate had a jealous boyfriend and did not want another man entering her apartment. Time went by, and in December 2019, Diogo learned he would finally receive compensation for his mother's death, which happened 3 years prior. After receiving the amount of 70,000 euros, he decided it was time to purchase a house so he wouldn't need to keep paying rent. Diogo then shared this exciting news with his friend Maria. Shortly thereafter, Maria resigned from her job at the hotel. She said she could no longer tolerate her co-workers' comments about the supposed relationship between her and Diogo. Additionally, she explained that she wanted more time with her mother, who required significant attention due to a mental illness. Initially, there was no reason to doubt her explanations. However, subsequent events hinted that her decision to quit might have been driven by more sinister motives. This is where Mariana Fona comes into play, a 20-year-old nurse at the hospital who had a stable relationship with Maria. The two young women lived together in Mariana's parents' home, since they were not financially secure enough to live independently and enjoy their relationship fully. Maria found herself in this situation when she learned about the significant sum of money Diogo would receive. Interestingly, from that point onward, Maria started drawing closer to Diogo. It appears likely that Maria shared this information with Mariana together. They plotted to deceive him and gain access to his bank account details with the intention of stealing his compensation money. One day, after Diogo had repeatedly refused, Maria informed the young man that she wished to spend a romantic evening with him. This proposal was a surprising gift for the 20-year-old, who found it hard to believe his ears. After waiting for so long, the idea of being close to the girl he loved made him ecstatic. Their rendezvous was scheduled for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo was elated and had no doubts about what might have led Maria to change her mind so abruptly. Although Maria and Mariana shared different accounts of what transpired that day, the following details are based on media reports and official information. Upon Diogo's arrival, Mariana offered him orange juice that she had brought herself. Unbeknownst to him, the drink contained a hidden ingredient: 3 ampoules of DIM, a central nervous system drug with anesthetic and sedative effects. Mariana reportedly proposed using this substance, which she had stolen from the hospital where she worked. The girl's plan entailed sedating Diogo to access his banking information and manipulate his fingers to unlock his phone. Mariana allegedly waited in a car outside while her friend executed their plan. She sent multiple texts to Maria, checking if the drug had taken effect, since it was acting slower than anticipated. Inside, tensions rose as Diogo grew increasingly unnerved, without understanding what was happening. Attempting to calm him, Maria promised an erotic dance, but insisted on tying him to a table first. After several minutes in this restrained position, Diogo panicked and pleaded with Maria to release him. Her demeanor turned aggressive as they began to struggle. Using her martial arts skills, she overpowered Diogo, bringing him down and restraining his neck with her arms, yet cutting off his air supply. According to Mariana's account, Maria eventually summoned her into the apartment. Mariana found Diogo on the floor and questioned Maria about deviating from their original plan, merely stealing his keys and taking his money. Upon discovering that Diogo was unresponsive, the nurse administered resuscitative measures. Upon awakening in a highly agitated state, he attempted to attack Mariana. Perhaps recognizing another conspirator against him, he tried defending himself. Reacting to Diogo's aggressive response towards her friend, Maria intervened by grabbing him from behind once more, bringing him down and constricting his neck again. In light of these events, both women's actions have been scrutinized as part of ongoing investigations rooted in available evidence and testimonies provided by those involved. Diogo's life tragically ended at the hands of the girl he loved. His body lay in the living room of Maria and Mariana's house, where they immediately set about their planned robbery. They first cut off his thumb and index finger to unlock his phone, access a mobile payment app, and transfer money. This process took several days due to a daily transaction limit. The crime occurred just as COVID-19 restrictions began, with remote working becoming commonplace. Diogo was supposed to go to work the next day. The girls attempted to prevent his co-workers from noticing his absence and raising concerns. They sent a message from Diogo's phone to an IT colleague, stating Diogo could not go to work and needed a replacement. This message raised suspicion because Diogo wasn't known for making such requests at short notice. When asked if everything was all right, Diogo's phone responded affirmatively. Conversations between this hotel employee and others continued through Friday into part of Saturday, but the messages increasingly seemed uncharacteristic of Diogo. One of these messages reached Diogo's supervisor, stating Diogo wouldn't return to work as he had met a woman from France and would be moving in with her. This struck the boss as odd, since Diogo was known for his reliability and wouldn't abruptly leave his job. Seeking clarification, the supervisor tried calling Diogo but received no answer. Another message claimed Diogo wasn't in a condition for phone calls. The supervisor responded that hearing directly from Diogo would be reassuring. The reactions from Diogo's loved ones to these impersonated messages led Maria and Mariana to adjust their strategy regarding his disappearance. They decided to fabricate a scenario suggesting that Diogo had taken his own life and then plotted to dismember his remains for disposal. Maria later confessed their plan was inspired by the TV series Dexter, which depicts a forensic expert who eliminates criminals while erasing traces of his crimes by dismembering victims. These actions highlight how communication breakdowns and erratic behaviors can raise suspicions and lead authorities closer to uncovering criminal deeds, even when efforts are made to mislead those searching for answers. After executing their reprehensible plan, they placed Diogo's body in trash bags, storing them in the trunk of their vehicle. They then proceeded to an ATM and a shopping mall. Security cameras captured them hugging and laughing. Upon returning to their residence, they began the gruesome task of dismembering body. Diogo's torso was eventually placed in a black bag, with the remaining parts disposed of in a container. During these events at Mariana's parental home, Diogo's friends initiated a campaign to report him missing and contacted the authorities. The authorities waited the mandatory 48 hours before officially declaring him missing. Subsequently, the girls departed from the house. Maria drove Diogo's car towards the cliff near Cabo de San Vicente lighthouse, with Mariana following in her own car. At approximately 2 p.m., Mariana discarded Diogo's torso off the cliff, abandoning his car nearby to create an impression that Diogo had ended his own life. Unfortunately for them, Maria did not anticipate that instead of falling into the sea, the remains would become lodged on a rock. The girls then departed together in Mariana's car. They drove approximately 7 kilometers to the Pego do Inferno waterfall in Tavira, where they disposed of what remained of Diogo into the water. Shortly after this incident, Diogo's vehicle was discovered in a parking lot near Cabo de San Vicente lighthouse. Reports indicated that 2 laptops were found within the car. Forensic police arrived promptly and conducted thorough land and sea searches. This led to the discovery of a young man's torso, partially enveloped by a black garbage bag near one location along the coast. Simultaneously, at another coastal site, Pego do Inferno, a French couple made a horrifying discovery: Diogo's head. After extensive efforts from law enforcement officers, his hands and feet were also recovered. The investigators handling this case found several aspects puzzling, considering that Diogo appeared to be an unassuming individual who avoided unsavory company based on collected data about him. Further probing by authorities revealed that Diogo had received significant compensation following his mother's death. They uncovered substantial transfers from Diogo's account to Maria's account through monetary transactions, tracking methodically carried out by investigators. The detectives' next step was to locate Maria and clarify why Diogo's funds ended up with her. The girl then attempted to persuade the police that she had killed the young man because he was attempting to abuse her. She asserted this as the reason she left the hotel before the incident. However, an examination of the text messages between the victim and Maria revealed that this was not true. She and Diogo had grown closer after Maria stopped working. During her first interaction with the officers, Maria claims sole responsibility for planning and executing the actions leading to the fatal shooting. She emphasized that Mariana had no involvement in the crime. However, Mariana's account contradicted Maria's claims. The nurse stated that Maria confided in her a plan to steal Diogo's money, but intended to take his life as well. She wanted him to suffer enough to disclose his bank account password. The collected evidence proved sufficient for convicting both girls. Investigators had phone records, the deceased's cell phone, and ATM surveillance footage at their disposal. Maria and Mariana were arrested on April 1, 2020, and appeared in court in June of that year. The judge meticulously followed Maria's recounting of events, where she insisted on pleading guilty and denied any involvement of Mariana. According to her version, Diogo's body remained for 2 days in a car parked in a garage, and it was there that his remains were dismembered when Mariana's family slept. After hearing Mariana's detailed account of events, the judge repeatedly asked about her whereabouts during the dismemberment executed with surgical precision at the joints. The courtroom's attention turned towards Mariana. She anticipated these questions and stated that since everyone knew she worked at a hospital, they assumed she dismembered the corpse herself. To clarify matters further, she suggested using internet resources for verification. Given the seriousness of this cold, calculated, reckless, and brutal crime, both individuals received custodial sentences, as determined by the judge. A few months later, on February 24, 2021, the trial began. During her testimony on February 26, 2021, Maria confirmed that she initially wanted revenge on Diogo for the alleged attempted violence, but stated she did not intend to take his life. The defendant admitted her intent was to humiliate the victim and verified that her friend had no relationship with the young man and was unaware of the alleged attempted violence. Maria also asserted that her actions were not motivated by compensation. The girls appeared in court together, however, they did not look at each other throughout the trial. Rumor suggests that after their arrest and subsequent jail time, they decided to end their relationship. The trial included testimony from several witnesses, including forensic expert Teresa Costa. The expert explained that the amount of dipum found in Diogo's blood was significantly less than expected from 3 ampoules, suggesting either Diogo had not taken the prescribed dose or had ingested it many hours before his death. On April 27, 2021, the court issued its decision. Maria was found guilty of aggravated murder, accessory to desecration of a body, robbery, unlawful access, and fraud. Additionally, she was convicted of carjacking and possession of an illegal weapon. She received a sentence of 25 years in prison and was ordered to pay Diogo's father €265,000 in compensation. Mariana was acquitted of murder but found guilty of desecrating a corpse and complicity in fraud. For this, she received a sentence of 4 years in prison. She was released because none of the offenses involved pre-trial detention until final sentencing. The court concluded that Mariana's attempt to revive Diogo demonstrated she did not intend to kill him. In reaching this decision, the judge took into account Mariana's confession where she expressed full responsibility for her actions. However, this verdict was not well received by the Portuguese public, who viewed Mariana as equally culpable in the heinous crime against Diogo as Maria. Following the verdict, Mariana exited through the back door where her father, present at all hearings, awaited her. Annie Tahan, a 24-year-old young mother, vanished mysterious circumstances. According to her partner, she abruptly left him and their newborn daughter without any explanation for her departure. The search for Annie extended over 4 years, with ongoing efforts to locate her, but no immediate results. Annie Tahan, born on May 1, 1965, was raised by her mother. She had a love for, enjoyed dancing and fun activities, and cherished simple joys. Annie always dreamed of having a large family and saw motherhood as her primary goal in life. She embraced this role early, welcoming her first son Jimmy at the age of 18, and then her second son Sean just a year later. By the age of 20, she had also given birth to her third child, a daughter named Shane. Tragically, shortly after Shane's birth, the children's father decided not to participate in their upbringing and left the family. This abandonment left Annie facing the challenges of being a single parent to 3 young children while living in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when Shane was just 6 months old and Annie was 22 years old, she met Michael Palin. He was a 32-year-old Navy petty officer serving on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their paths crossed in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked. Michael quickly became taken with Annie during an encounter at the waterfront. Living in Charleston, South Carolina, Michael was highly respected in the Navy for his work as a computer systems operator. He actively participated in military operations and had been recognized with several awards. Annie found herself deeply attracted to Michael's naval career and soon fell in love with him. She confided to a friend that she believed she had found a man worthy of her love. After dating for several months and developing their relationship further, Annie and Michael decided to live together as a family unit, along with her 2 sons and daughter. However, their shared life took an unfortunate turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. At that time, Annie wasn't home. Michael was alone with the children. While Michael managed to escape along with Jimmy and Sean, who could walk, Shane, being too young, sadly didn't make it out alive. After returning, Annie tried to go back into the burning apartment to rescue Shane. However, neighbors restrained her. The loss of Shane due to the fire left a significant impact on Annie. She shared that this tragic event created an irreplaceable void in her heart. As authorities started investigating the fire, experts faced difficulties in determining the exact cause of ignition. The circumstances were highly suspicious to investigators. Even with these suspicions, the investigation concluded without assigning responsibility to any individual. Following the devastating fire, Annie Tahan moved with her sons to her mother's residence in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael Palin immersed himself in work and chose to live in the barracks. A few months later, another alarming incident happened near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard caught fire. Investigators quickly identified the fire's origin and discovered a lighter engraved with Bramby, the name of Michael Palin's ship. This evidence pointed toward Michael as a prime suspect. Despite this suggestive evidence, police couldn't conclusively prove his involvement because of insufficient proof. After this second fire incident, child welfare authorities in Maine determined that Annie Tahan's sons were in a potentially dangerous situation under her care. Consequently, they decided to remove Jamie and Sean from their mother's custody and place them under foster care administered by social services. This decision left Annie devastated as she fervently tried to regain custody of her children. Despite all her efforts, she couldn't do so, inflicting profound emotional distress and leaving her heartbroken over being separated from her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he rented an apartment and reconnected with Annie despite their tumultuous past. Annie agreed to communicate with him and eventually moved in with him to Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston, where they lived as a couple. However, Annie's stay was soon marred by a startling discovery. She found a photograph of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing his marital status. Confronted with the photograph, Michael admitted to Annie that he was married, but had been long divorced. He disclosed that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children resided in his mother's house in Savannah, Georgia. Despite Michael's reassurances of no ongoing relationship with Dawn, Annie was shaken by the revelation. She contemplated leaving him, but ultimately decided to stay, still seeing Michael as an ideal partner for starting a family. Their cohabitation, however, soon turned sour. Michael's behavior towards Annie grew increasingly hostile and demeaning. Annie, planning to return to her mother's house, discovered she was pregnant. This news led her to reconsider her plans to leave, filled with the joy of expecting another child. In October 1989, a month before her disappearance, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Though Annie knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt Jade filled a significant void in her heart. Yet in the month following Jade's birth, Michael's treatment of Annie deteriorated further. He resorted to openly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided in a friend about her fear of Michael's relentless pursuit if she attempted to flee. Michael's controlling behavior escalated. He confined Annie to their apartment while he was at work, disconnecting the phone and placing it in his briefcase. Annie was increasingly alarmed by Michael's actions. Just 2 days before her vanishing act, in a state of distress, Annie reached out to a close friend, Katie French, via phone call. In the call, Annie revealed to Katie that she had disclosed her intention to leave Michael. However, Michael had retorted that if she left, their daughter Jade would remain with him. Annie found herself in a desperate situation, overwhelmed with emotion. She urgently pleaded with Katie to come immediately and rescue both her and her daughter Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was preoccupied and could not come to her aid. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping it would enable her to escape and return to Portland. Unbeknownst to them, this heartfelt conversation would be their last exchange. 2 days later, on November 7th, 1989, Katie attempted to contact Annie, but received no response. Several days passed before Michael Palin informed Katie that on November 6th, Annie had gathered her belongings and departed in an unknown direction. Expecting Annie to reach out from her new location, Katie waited anxiously. However, 2 weeks went by with no word. By Thanksgiving on November 24th, Annie had been unreachable for 20 days. Growing increasingly concerned, Katie contacted all of Annie's friends and acquaintances, but found that no one had any information about her whereabouts. She then tried to report 24-year-old Annie as missing to the police, but was informed that she could not file an official report since she was not a blood relative. Months passed without any sign of Annie. Eventually, Katie obtained the phone number of Michael Palin's mother. Upon contacting her, Katie was shocked to learn that Jade was in her care. This revelation confirmed Katie's worst fears. She knew Annie would never leave her daughter behind willingly. Despite the concerning developments, Michael Palin displayed a notable lack of concern regarding Annie's disappearance. He made no apparent efforts to engage with law enforcement or initiate a search for her whereabouts, and soon received a transfer to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Months following Annie's disappearance, the search for her was finally launched after a report from her mother prompted official action. The initial focus of the investigation was her live-in partner, Michael Palin, who quickly emerged as the primary suspect. Michael detailed that on the morning of November 6th, he had woken to find Annie gone, having left their daughter in his care. He recounted that the previous night, Annie had expressed a desire to end their relationship. Michael did not attempt to find Annie, believing that their relationship had conclusively ended and further communication was unnecessary. He also claimed to be unaware of her being reported missing or of her lack of contact with family and friends. Upon inspecting the couple's rented apartment, police found no evidence, such as traces, clues, or suspicious items that could provide leads in the case. Annie Tarn's case seemed to have hit a dead end with no large-scale search initiated for the young woman. Her whereabouts, whether she was still alive, and the potential motives of any abductor remained mysteries. The only certain detail was that the last person reported to have seen her was her live-in partner, Michael. For an arduous span of 4 years, there was no news or sightings of Annie. Katie French, her close friend, remained the sole active seeker, tirelessly cooperating with the investigation. Katie invested approximately $16,000 in phone bills alone, employed a private detective, and was steadfast in her determination to continue the search. She reached out to various organizations that could potentially provide insight into Michael Palin's background. Katie personally held a strong belief that Michael was a dangerous individual and should not be trusted. She harbored a deep fear of him, aware that if Michael became aware of her involvement with the police, it could potentially put her in harm's way. In 1993, a significant development occurred in Annie Tarn's case, as it was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, marking a pivotal shift in the investigation. The NCIS agents initiated a comprehensive re-examination of the case, starting from scratch. They found Michael Palin at the naval base Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. When police agents approached him to discuss Annie Tarn's disappearance, Michael said he would only talk if his was present. Later, he stopped cooperating altogether. He refused to give any more help or information. The Marine Police gathered all the details they could about missing Annie. They then reached out to South Carolina law enforcement. They asked them to check their records for any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth a month before she went missing. The South Carolina police shared a case about a deceased woman who also gave birth just a month before her death. They provided a sketch of this woman's face, which shocked the Marine Police agents when they saw it. They were sure they'd found Annie. The scene revealed a violent murder. Her body was found beside a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from where she lived with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying, showing a rare level of violence. Annie's face was severely damaged, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of careful work to reconstruct it. Annie's body had been put in a naval bag soaked in gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was found at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie stopped answering her calls. A match of dental records confirmed the woman's identity as Annie Tahan. With this discovery, Michael Palin became the prime suspect in her murder right away. Marine police agents set up a detailed investigation plan, which started with examining his financial activities closely. On the day Annie vanished, investigators found that Michael made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her char remains were found. Digging into his phone records, they discovered that on the night of November 6th, he had made 2 calls to his mother's house in Savannah. The first call was at 4:35 a.m. and the second one at 5:17 a.m. With this evidence, agents hypothesized that Michael may have killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body to the roadside, where he set it on fire. To push forward with the investigation, NCIS agents aimed to find Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and living at his mother's house in Savannah. After Annie disappeared, Dawn divorced Michael and started moving around a lot, living in different states as if she were avoiding something or someone. Eventually, agents tracked her down in Miami, Florida during the summer of 1995. That was almost 6 years after Annie had been murdered. At this point, Dawn had become involved with spiritual practices for income. When agents contacted her at work to discuss Annie's disappearance, her calm response was surprising. She even asked how long they'd talk because she wanted to know if she'd have time to eat. Her reaction wasn't what the agents expected. They thought she'd be more emotional when talking about Annie. Despite being calm during their interaction, inconsistencies began appearing during a lengthy 10-hour interrogation. Initially, Dawn's story matched Michael Palin's version. She said Michael told her that his mistress had left, and that he planned to raise their daughter by himself when she visited his apartment. However, inconsistencies emerged regarding when exactly she visited Michael's apartment. At one point during the questioning, Dawn became silent for a moment and looked down before expressing a wish to tell the truth. In a surprisingly emotionless manner, without any tears, she proceeded to share information she had kept hidden for 6 years. Dawn recounted that early one morning, Michael urgently summoned her to his Charleston apartment. Upon arrival, Dawn discovered Annie Tahan's lifeless body on the living room floor. Michael Dawn to go to the bedroom to meet his daughter. At that time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and shared 3 children. Michael confessed his affair with Annie to Dawn, explaining that it had led to the birth of a daughter. He pleaded with her to accept the child and assist him in raising her. According to Dawn, Michael, unwilling to engage in a custody battle with Annie, opted for murder as a more straightforward solution. On the night transitioning from November 5th to 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed. After a moment of intimacy, Annie fell asleep. It was then that Michael took a crowbar and began to strike her viciously. Tragically, their daughter Jade was lying next to Annie on the bed throughout this horrific act. Michael relentlessly hit Annie on the head, each blow more brutal than the last. Despite her strength, Annie eventually succumbed to her injuries right there in the bed. In a chilling turn of events, Michael reached out to his wife Dawn, requesting her urgent presence. He then placed Annie's body in a naval bag and transferred it to the trunk of his car, where he had also stored a canister of gasoline. He positioned both his wife and daughter in the car's back seat before embarking on a lengthy drive of approximately 100 miles. Upon finding a secluded spot by the roadside, Michael removed Annie's body from the trunk, drenched it in gasoline, and set it ablaze. After ensuring that the fire had taken hold, he hurriedly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn Breeze's revelation provided a pivotal turn in the investigation, marking the first substantial evidence since the discovery of Annie's remains. The investigators then requested Dawn make a monitored phone call to her ex-husband Michael, discussing Annie Tahan's murder. She consented and contacted him accordingly. Michael indicated the need for a serious conversation as Annie's body had been located and identified. Michael's response, "No, they didn't do that," suddenly confirmed to the agents the veracity of Dawn's account. In the call, Dawn also informed Michael that blood had been detected in their former apartment, and the NCIS suspected them of involvement in the murder. She urged Michael to devise an explanation for the blood found in the apartment. Michael's reply, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with something," did not include any direct admissions, yet his demeanor suggested a clear understanding of the context of their discussion. He refrained from asking unnecessary questions or offering denials, implying his awareness of the situation. This interaction solidified the theory that Tahan had been murdered in Michael's apartment. Towards the end of their conversation, Michael advised Dawn to be cautious with her phone communications, insisting they would collaboratively manage the situation. NCIS agents took Dawn Breeze to the crime scene to unearth any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before the visit. At the apartment, Dawn meticulously recounted and demonstrated the positioning of Annie's body and sequence of events. She pointed out an area near a wall and baseboard where there had been a significant accumulation of blood, affecting both carpet and concrete floor beneath it. Since Michael had vacated the apartment, landlords had replaced and cleaned carpets multiple times, explaining absence of visible traces. However, when police applied a special chemical to concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared indicative of protein presence, aligning with Dawn's account, where Annie's body had lain. Despite blood seeping into concrete, NCIS faced challenges in conclusively proving substance to be blood. Consequently, search for additional physical evidence continued. Dawn also mentioned a nightstand with television near bed, where Annie was killed. According to her, television had been splattered with blood during murder, and Michael mentioned its need for extensive cleaning due to stains. He later disposed of television, possibly selling rather than discarding it. Michael's pursuit of a functional appliance, considering his frugal nature, felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. Despite this, the agents were resolute in their efforts to locate it. By this point, Michael Palin had become aware of the NCIS surveillance, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. This realization triggered paranoia, making him acutely conscious of NCIS's monitoring activities. The NCIS agents were concerned that Michael might attempt to flee, coerce witnesses, or potentially inflict harm on others. In a dramatic turn of events during one surveillance mission, Michael tried to evade the authorities. However, his attempt was unsuccessful, as the police swiftly caught him. Consequently, on October 11, 1995, Michael Palin was apprehended and taken into custody. While held in a military prison under suspicion of murder, NCIS agents diligently worked to locate and interview all residents of the apartment complex where the murder took place in November 1989. Their perseverance paid off 3 months later when they encountered a neighbor who disclosed he had purchased a television from Michael. Remarkably, the television was still operational and present in his home. The police promptly seized the television and dispatched it to the FBI laboratory for a thorough forensic analysis. To their significant breakthrough, the examination revealed 11 blood spots inside the speaker. These blood samples were identified as matching Annie Tahan's DNA, providing a critical piece of evidence in the ongoing murder investigation. At this stage of the case, Michael Palin's legal representatives announced his willingness to enter a guilty plea if the death penalty was set aside. Even though the prosecutor was unhappy with the way things turned out, military law required that such an agreement be made during the trial. Michael Palin admitted his guilt without showing much emotion. He wrecked the details of his crime with a detachment that was unsettling, almost like reading off a mundane list. His narrative lacked any signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, Michael Palin was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with chance for parole after 30 years. He also received a dishonorable discharge from the Navy. Despite knowing about her husband's crime and staying silent for 6 years, Dawn Breeze avoided legal consequences due to her crucial confession to NCIS. This confession significantly helped advance the investigation. Annie's children, her sons and daughter, have been informed about their biological mother's tragic fate. They understand she did not abandon them. Jade, the daughter Annie had with Michael, has grown into a beautiful woman within the Palmer family. She has notably kept no relationship with her father. In a surprising development, Michael Palin was released from prison in 2013 after serving just 17 years due to good behavior. His exact location is currently unknown. It's advised that anyone who comes into contact with him should exercise caution.